Well, welcome back engineering students to campus. This is the first video that you've had since returning, and I've really intentionally tried to give you guys a couple of weeks of more gentle things, those discussion boards and stuff like that. I'd say that's been reasonably successful, maybe not in a huge way. Some of your teams are doing a great job with those discussion boards, coming up with this design. I can't emphasize how much easier this is in person, but thanks for making the most of it. Okay, so let's get into this new topic of free body diagrams. And we're going straight back to the same old format where I give you the reading in this assignment. So read that, watch the video. I don't honestly know which one makes more sense, but I'm generally expecting you've read first and then watching. Or you could kind of have the book in front of you as I do this as well. I think you're going to find that this reading today and this topic actually has a lot of similarities though. There's not going to be a ton of new things, which is good, that's in your favor, but also make sure that you do pay attention and that you use that as an opportunity to really get on top of it and understand things more deeply, because I'm not adding a lot of, like expanded knowledge. So let's build those skills. Now we really do have to understand this idea. The free body diagram is the idea that when you have a situation, let's actually take the situation in your test, or sorry, what do we call it? Quiz, assignment, whatever it is that's coming up. I have a lady pushing a fridge across her kitchen floor. There it is. Lady, she's so happy to be pushing that fridge. And there's a whole lot going on. The lady is in a house, maybe maybe there's a ceiling and a floor, and there's light fixtures, and maybe there are like crazy children doing all sorts of things. There could be anything happening. All right. There could be spilled juice on the floor. I don't know. This kind of feels like my house. And so the point of the free body diagram is you cut through all of the noise and you consider only the thing that you really care about. And the way that I like to say this, I say it every year, is where we're just cutting off the rest of the universe. Okay, this is what a free body diagram is all about. So in this little picture that I've drawn, it depends on what you're wanting to analyze at a particular time, because there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of forces and motion and action, reaction. There's self-weight. There is torque, or moments. There's accelerations happening. But what do we care about right now? In the assignment that you've got this week, what I'm asking you to focus on for this problem is the fridge. So what you do is you say, well, we're going to do a free body diagram of the fridge only. And we're going to cut off the rest of the universe. So the light hanging nearby is of no consequence. The floor is interacting, but we're not going to draw the floor. We're cutting off the rest of the universe. The spilled juice on the floor, yeah, that may affect the friction maybe, but we are not going to draw it. We're not going to draw the lady pushing on it, even though she is obviously interacting with it. We're definitely not going to draw the screaming crazy child nearby. We are cutting off the rest of the universe. So the picture in front of you here on the screen is not a free body diagram as it stands right now. The free body diagram is, in fact, I'll draw it with a little less perspective. This is the start of the free body diagram. You just draw the fridge. Do not be tempted to draw the floor. Do not be tempted to draw the lady, even though those are the things most obviously interacting. This is it's a free body. It's free from the universe. Okay, it's been cut free, set free. It's been emancipated from the universe. It's all we care about right now. Now, you might very well create a different free body diagram. You could just as easily say, actually, what is the lady experiencing herself? Still smiling. She's pushing on that thing. You might say, what is she experiencing? And then you cut off the fridge, you cut off the floor, you cut off the child, you cut off everything around you, you cut off the whole rest of the universe, and you just draw herself. Okay, so it depends what you're working on, it depends what the focus is. In our particular question, we started to focus on the fridge. Now, as we go through the text now, he lists 4 things, and I'm going to repeat them here, but maybe slightly commentate and disagree, agree, etc. as I am wont to do. He lists external forces, internal forces, support reactions, and self-weights. Okay. That's just straight from page 170. Now let me give my commentary. So firstly, I would change this. I'm going to say internal forces, maybe, but I'm going to put it in parentheses. Oops, and I'm going to draw my parentheses better. I'm going to say internal forces is not really something we're generally going to use, because once you have clipped a particular thing out from the universe and set it all by itself in a free body diagram, then really there's no such thing anymore as an internal force, at least not that's going to affect the outcome of the situation. Sometimes you do clip out. Okay, here, little aside here. You might have a bridge made of a bunch of different structures, like a truss bridge, okay, with a train running across or something. Sometimes we do clip off half of one of those members, okay? We actually kind of slice it. Oh, maybe I shouldn't draw it that way. That looks like a wall that it's glued to or something. That's not what I mean. So sometimes we do cut, and then you might get internal forces as well as the external forces happening, things like that. But now that you've clipped off that member, that internal force, which is this one right here, that actually now is external to what you clipped out. That's kind of complex, I know, I'm just racing through it, but all I'm going to say to summarize is I don't really think you should worry about internal forces at this level. It's just not going to matter. I'm also going to do this. I'm going to say, I think in your sequence of doing this, you should do self-weight first. Well, sorry, I should say second, before you do the other things. Support reactions is then third in the sequence, after you've accounted for external forces and self-weight. So I just sort of disagreed slightly with his order. And then the other thing that I'll say is I'm going to include friction itself as a separate line item. Friction really is actually an external force, because it's a real force. It's happening external to the body. It's not to do with weight or anything like that. But really, by that definition, support reactions are also external forces, but we listed those separately. So I would like to list friction as a separate thing to help you remember it. And this is the order in which you should calculate things, or in which you should write them down and list them. If you don't do it in this order, you can run into all sorts of problems, so just trust me on this. External forces, then self-weight, then support reactions, and then friction. All right, so how does this work? We, maybe I'll just talk through the diagram on page 171. He's got the guy pushing on a crate, and it's easy to miss, but the crate also has a lid. So you see what it says on page 171. the crate has a lid with a weight of 50 newtons. Okay, so we are going to draw the free body diagram, FBD, and I will use that acronym, of just the crate itself. Okay, remember back what I said here? You're clipping something out from the whole picture and you're isolating it, whether it's the fridge or the lady or the child or the lamp fixture, but you pick one thing and you cut it off from the rest of the universe. Very dramatic. So in this case, we are going to pick the crate. Okay, so the crate, and when I say the crate, we're actually meaning even without the lid, just the crate itself. He didn't draw those cool lines diagonally, but every Bugs Bunny cartoon I've ever seen has them, so we should have them too. And look, little nails in each corner. Look at that. So now, now we've drawn the picture. We resisted the temptation to draw the man, to draw the lid, to draw the floor, nothing else. You could, I guess, copy over the dimensions 1 meter by 1 meter, but it's probably fine. And let's start working through our checklist over here. So, external forces. The most obvious external force is what they have called P-man. P-man. P subscript man. P is a very common letter to use for forces. Not really sure why. Maybe it means like push-pull, not sure. But P is super common. You can see in the little quick sketch I did above, I just lapsed into using P without even thinking. It's very common. So that is your external force. And so this is stuff like, you know, wind blowing, things that are attached, ropes that are attached, people that are pushing or pulling, I don't know, you know, impacts from collisions, stuff like that. Anything that is clearly external and active and happening because of an interaction with something else. And we're going to generally say, by the way, that interactions are constant forces, not like bursts of force, but just like smooth, static, unchanging things. Even when they're sliding around, that we can allow that. I would probably prefer that you showed it as per I've drawn it here, as opposed to doing it the second way on page 171, but they're both correct. Okay, going down the list, we have self-weight. Now the self-weight of this crate, you know what, I'm looking through to see if he actually gave that. Huh. Do you know what, I'm actually not seeing a self-weight listed anywhere. Okay, we're gonna have to make this up. I didn't realize that. I'm looking on all the pages. Yeah, he's never actually said how massive the crate is. Okay, well, his loss. Our gain, we'll make something up. So let's say that the crate has a mass of, let's make up a number here, 60 kilograms. Okay? If we are at 60 kilograms, then this is where you do your little calculation, and we did this a few weeks ago now, but we say weight is always m times g. So the mass is 60, g is 9.8 or 10 if you're in a restaurant waiting for a friend without a calculator and all you have is a pencil and a napkin. So the weight in this case, 60 times 9.8, again, very useful to like mentally tell yourself that that's approximately 600, but the more accurate answer that I would prefer, if you can, is 588. And this is why we learned how to do centroids and things. The centroid of this, because the square is pretty obvious. It's right there in the dead center. That's where the CG is, so that is where the weight is going to act. And of course we are assuming that the crate and its weight, it's all perfectly homogeneous, like it's all perfectly evenly distributed. There's not like heavier things in the bottom of the crate and then lighter things at the top of the crate, or the other way around. Not very realistic actually, because heavier things do tend to settle inside a container, but we're just going to say dead center. Maybe that's just the weight of the wood itself. Maybe it's an empty crate. In that case, this would be correct. Okay, next in our list after self-weight is support reactions. Okay, so this one is very straightforward. This is now saying, like, what is the floor doing back to the thing? And we really rely on our knowledge here that we're in a statics course, therefore the sum of all forces is 0. We actually use that, we rely on that. We say, well, if that be true, talking like a pirate for some reason, if that be true, then Fy, which we know is 0, and let's say this is the positive direction, remember doing this, is negative 588 plus, and I guess we should make up a little unknown reaction here. We'll call it R for reaction, plus R. Oops, pen didn't go all the way to the edge of the screen there. So you see what I did there? I have an unknown reaction force, which is clearly going to be pushing straight back up, because remember that normal forces, there's that word, normal forces are perpendicular. This is a normal ground reaction force, a perpendicular ground reaction force. And although we can intuitively see that it's going to be 588, that's the formal way to write the equation right here, and that is a very good thing for you to do. Running through the sums again, we can say, okay, well, put that over the other side, add 588 to both sides, and the reaction force is 588. No surprises there. But it can get surprising because sometimes the applied forces mess with the vertical, and then the reaction force will change. Okay, and then the last thing you got to do is, oh, sorry, let's backtrack. I forgot one thing. The crate has a lid. Crate has a lid. Ah, that changes everything. Okay. Sorry. Let's undo what I just did there. And that's good for you to see, you know, I'm just making sure you're paying attention. Good for you to see that even the pros miss things. Okay, so we have a lid on this thing, and so that would have been listed under the external forces. The lid is external to the crate itself. So I am going to put a 50 Newton weight right there on top. All right. So how does that change things now? Well, it changes it by saying we have a negative 588 for the downwards self-weight. We also have a negative 50 pressing down on the whole thing from the lid. And then we have the reaction force pointing back up. Okay, see how that changed the equation? Now that I'm accounting for everything that was actually described. Sorry. All right, now we can do our algebra again just as we did. We will now have 638, that's from adding those two numbers, equals R. There we go. Little subtle change there. 638 newtons pressing back up from the floor. The floor has to resist both the weight of the crate and the weight of the lid. That's the explanation there. Okay, last thing on our list is the friction. And the friction is always going to act, here I'll write this down, friction always acts to resist the motion or intended motion. And this is basically saying that, like, friction never helps you out. Friction never, like, does anything active of its own accord. Friction is always trying to resist whatever is happening or is trying to happen. I don't think that we actually said, I'm looking for it. I don't think the author actually says if the crate is moving or not. It could be that he's sliding at a constant speed across the floor. It could be that he's trying to and it's not moving yet. Either way, it doesn't matter. As long as there is no acceleration, then the sum of all horizontal forces must be 0. Okay? Remember, that is coming, just like this came from that, this is also coming out of that. Logically, if all forces are 0, then the vertical forces and the horizontal force sums individually must also be 0. So the friction force, we could draw it maybe like right here. Let me do force of subscript FR, force of friction. Okay, again, note the direction or the sense. Sense just means direction. Note that it is resisting the motion or the intended motion. Whether it is sliding or whether it is about to try to slide, friction will still work the same direction. So we're going to say, in accordance with the direction that I just drew there, we're going to say we have 100 minus the force of friction, and then that makes it extremely obvious that the friction force is 100 newtons. Okay, go back to our free body diagram, just sketch in the result. Whoop, can't seem to write a 0. There we go. Okay, sorry it got a little bit cluttered. I'm trying to keep it all more or less on the same screen. That is the completion of the free body diagram. Okay, it has the external forces. Okay, external forces were the 100 newtons from the man and the 50 newtons from the lid. The self-weight was the 588 newtons going down. I need some more colors. The support reaction was this one right here, pushing back up, had to resist both the weight and the lid. And then friction, as I've said, I like to give it its own little category, although it is an external force. There it is. All right. Now I think I want to actually start to wrap this up and land this plane, because that's about all that you'll need in order to get started on that assignment. But one discussion they have, which is pretty important and not too hard to understand, is on page 173, and it's something called distributed loads or distributed forces. I don't think that we've really done this yet. And I think I'll actually veer away from the book's example for a reason that I won't get into. But a distributed force, this is how things actually do happen. Let's say you have like a floor and there's like here we go, it's a sack of potatoes. Okay, it's like a Hessian bag full of potatoes. There they are. Some of them are spilling out, and this bag is on the floor, and it's got like a size to it. It's not like a magical little pinprick point force. We may say that the mass of this bag of potatoes is 100 kilograms. Therefore, the weight is about 1,000 newtons. Okay, that's the approximate version. But like we know that in real life, it's not really totally accurate to say that, well, this is all coming at one place just like this, and it pokes through like a needle at that particular location. We know that's very, very much not how things work. It would be more accurate to say instead, in the blue, that there's actually this kind of like distributed load that happens all along that region of the floor. Okay, and that is how we draw that. We draw it with like a little I don't know how to properly describe that, but like a series of arrows that are connected with a line running across them. There's another example on page 173, as I said, and you can find again on 174. I guess it's the same one. But that is how we draw that, and we do that. Let's see. And the units are in force per distance. So I'm going to say in this case, my potato sack has a distributed load of, let's say, 2,000 newtons per meter. Now, I think this is fairly intuitive, but I realize that most of you or all of you have seen this for the first time. If something has a distributed load of 2,000 newtons per meter, how is it that I could be saying that the weight is only 1,000 newtons? Do you see what's happening in this diagram? Do you see the possible discrepancy and what the reason is? What's happening is my potato sack must only be a half a meter wide, which is about right for a potato sack. Okay, half a meter is about 1.5 feet. I've got a half meter wide potato sack, and so let's see, how do we explain this? So you take the 2,000, here this will be a nice little unit study, the 2,000 newtons per meter, and then you multiply that by half a meter, and you see what that does to the units. You see how we get, see how the meters cancel out, and what you're left with there is 2,000 times 0.5 gives you 1,000. Newton per meters times meters gives you newtons. Okay, that's how those two things can both be true. Okay, the force is that distributed load times that like the size of the distributed load. In the example in the textbook, the size, the length of the distributed weight zone of the lid was 1 meter. You can see that on page 171 in the very first diagram. The crate is 1 meter wide. So for him it was 50 newtons per meter times a distance of 1 meter gave a lid size, sorry, a lid weight of 50 newtons. We actually just kind of skipped that step and just went straight to the point force. But this is something that I do want you to know about, because it does happen all the time. It happens in more complex situations, like when you have a dam wall. Pardon my language. You knew I was going to make that joke, didn't you? Okay, you have this is like a cross section of a dam. All the water, the bubbles, the fishies, that's a fish. And in that case, we also have a distributed load. In this case, it's more complex. It's not actually a smooth, even distributed load. It actually grows linearly with depth, and we draw it like this. We're not going to get into this example at all, but I'm just showing you, like, water is an obvious thing where you've got this big smushy area of, you know, spread out force happening, as opposed to just saying, oh yeah, the water goes poink and just acts at a particular point. Now, it is very possible and acceptable, it's totally fine, in fact it's the only practical thing, is that if you are given, I'll even write this here, if you are given a distributed load, like let's say that I started it's hard to talk and write. If you are given the distributed load up front, like you were on page 171, like you were, like let's say that I gave you the blue 2,000 newtons per meter first, what you always do is you calculate the point load, and then you use that. Okay, you turn the distributed load into the point load with this little equation I've shown you just here, and then the point load is much, much easier to actually work with from that point forward, no pun intended. Okay. Basic assignment students, I'm not going to put a distributed load thing in yours, but advanced students, I will put that in. But it really is as simple as this. It's just multiplying the distributed load in in force per length times the particular length that it's applied over, and that will give you the equivalent point load. Okay, let me actually put that word in here. That's a very important word. These two things are equivalent. All right, well, that's really it. If you need any more help than that, you really just should watch the video again, or ask me some questions, maybe ask me in the yard now that we're all back together. But I hope this has been helpful too. Don't forget this list. If you remember this list, then you'll be just fine. External forces, then the self-weight, then the support reactions, then the friction. Make sure you cut off the rest of the universe, avoid the temptation to include the screaming children, and all will be well. Have a great rest of your day, whatever you may be doing and wherever you may be. Over and out.